Welcome to Timeless Wisdom with Dennis Prager. Hear thousands of hours of Dennis's lectures, courses, and classic radio programs. And to purchase Dennis Prager's Rational Bibles, go to DennisPrager.com.
This next tape, it's about the differences between America's values and Europe's values. And while I've alluded to this in some of previous talks, it is now brought together because the battle for the future of the world really is between those two and whether or not, of course, Islamic militancy takes root in the world. Anyway, that's the story from here. I hope you enjoy it. Better late than never. I know I'm late. Please forgive me. I love to get mail from you. Write tape subscriber in your email. And I have a pretty good batting average in responding to you. By the way, in the questions, I do leave the questioners there. If you turn up your volume, I think you should be able to hear it. The lecture begins in a few seconds. Enjoy. He's right. It couldn't be more timely. This subject of the differences between us, the U.S., and Europe is, in my opinion, one of the 2-3 most important subjects in the world today. And it is not one that most Americans, or for that matter Europeans, even though they feel there's a lot of friction, I'm not sure that there are many who could truly define it, though I think Europeans have a stronger sense of why they have contempt for us than we understand why they do. But I understand why they do, and I think they're wrong. And I will try to explain the differences between our value systems, which are so powerful, by the way, that I would argue that right now there are 2 civilizational battles going on. And they are between militant Islam, not normal, peaceful Islam, but militant Islam, of which there is, unfortunately, more than a few members, and the rest of the world. That would include us and Europe. And the other one is between Europe, specifically Western Europe, and the United States, between Western European values and American values. This one is not... If I'd have said this a year ago, people would have thought that I had been smoking heavy substances. This is now more apparent. There is a great deal of hostility to us in Western Europe, and I understand it. I have spent many years, well, not many years, but I have traveled for my whole lifetime, including a year in Europe, and I feel that I have a good sense of why they have contempt for us and our cowboys. And I will try to explain these differences to you, and then we will have a good, lively session. And if you don't agree with me, I particularly would like you to speak up. But if I am right, this is a very big deal, and we really do have a war of ideas going on in the world, so much so that I would make this prediction, and I almost never make predictions, because it's a very dangerous craft. But I believe that the world, right now, it is being determined where the world will be in not too long. In other words, what ideology will dominate humanity in the coming years. And there are 3 possibilities that I see. And they are Islam, European socialism/secularism, and American values, which are Judeo-Christian/capitalist. Those are the 3 possibilities in the world, and that is what the battles going on now are about. I do not see, for example, the world being dominated by an ideology coming out of China. Although China may be one of the great powers of the world in our lifetime, I don't see it as an ideological power. There are 2 ideologies, basically, in China: Confucianism, traditional Chinese values, and communism. And neither of them, I believe, have a world appeal that I can foresee, nor do they intend it to have. Well, communism intended one day, but it is moribund. It is over. It is dead except in name. So there is really no other alternative. Again, let me review that. The world will be dominated either by Islam, by socialism/secularism coming from Western Europe and the elites of America and Latin America, because America is divided between European Americans, and I don't mean race, I mean ideology, European Americans and American Americans. I will talk about that. These are really enormous issues, and as I always say on my radio show, it's not important to me if people agree. It's important that we agree that this is where it is different. In other words, I want clarity over agreement. The third possibility is American values, but they are uniquely American. Whereas European socialist/secularist values are not uniquely West European, the elites of almost all countries share them. The United Nations Secretary General would share them. The President of Mexico shares them. Much of Canada shares them. Much of the United States shares those values. But American values are uniquely American, and this is a problem insofar as if you want one of those three to really dominate the world, and I don't mean in an imperialist sense, but just ideologically, if you would like Judeo-Christian values and capitalism to take over, if you will, from alternative ways of leading a life, it's a problem because they are uniquely American. There are capitalists everywhere in the world, or in many places of the world, but capitalism, the belief that it is a good system, has been quintessentially American, not European. And Judeo-Christian values are uniquely American. There is no other country in the world that has self-defined itself as Judeo-Christian. There have been many Christian countries, there are many secular countries, there are Muslim countries, but there is only one country that has self-consciously called itself Judeo-Christian. It is the United States of America. And Judeo-Christian is not the same as Christian. If it were the same, we would just say Christian. We don't say Judeo-Christian to be polite to Judeos. We say Judeo-Christian because even when there were almost no Jews in the United States of America, it was still a very powerful source. It was the Jewish, the Hebrew, the Old Testament was still an animating presence in the life of the Christian founders of the United States. That's why, as I always say, remember, it's Benjamin Franklin, not Luke Franklin. The names were taken from the Hebrew Bible, from the Old Testament. It was an Old Testament-oriented Christianity which founded this country, different from European Christianity. And I tell my listeners all the time, don't ever confuse American Christians with European Christians historically. It's not fair to American Christians. Don't saddle American Christians with the Crusades. Don't saddle American Christians with the Inquisition. Don't saddle American Christians with anti-Semitism. Those were European issues, not American ones. American Christians were different, self-consciously different. Thomas Jefferson wanted the Great Seal. This is Thomas Jefferson, who was not a particularly fervent Christian. He wanted the Great Seal of the United States to be, and this is unbelievably appropriate at this moment, he wanted it to be a picture of the Israelites' exodus from Egypt. Because that is how he saw and how the founders saw America. America had an exodus from Europe. The ancient Jews were to Egypt what these new Americans were to Europe. They left it, they rejected it, they escaped from it. And just as, and I teach the Bible, and just as so much of the first 5 books of the Old Testament, the Torah, is a rejection of Egyptian culture, So too, much of the United States was a rejection of European culture. In that day, whether it was monarchies, or whether it was tyranny, or whether it was state religion, whatever it was. And it continues to this day that the United States is a rejection of Europe. The problem is the founders knew what they were rejecting. We're not so sure. And that's why this subject is so important, to help give Americans clarity on what we are rejecting and why they are angry at us, indeed have disdain for us. And I will explain it. To me, it is as clear as the proverbial sun rising in the east. And I hope it will be clear to you afterwards as well. There are enormous differences between American values and European values. In no order of importance, let me offer a list. Europe, America, Europe, America. Europe believes, the Europe that I'm talking about, let me make something very clear again. The Europe that I'm talking about is Western Europe, or as Donald Rumsfeld put it, the old Europe. All right? It's very important that you realize that. It is not the new Europe of Eastern Europe. Just a few weeks ago, about 10 or 13 East European countries signed a document in support of the United States. That is when Jacques Chirac, the president of France, said, "You come knocking at the door and open your mouths, you should know when to shut up." Those were his words. You should know when to shut up. Bulgaria didn't like that. Romania didn't like that. Latvia didn't like that. Lithuania didn't. Estonia didn't. Poland didn't. This is very interesting. There's a huge rift in Europe between pro-America and anti-America. I knew this when I was a kid. In my 20s, I used to go to Eastern Europe because my field of study was communist affairs. And I would come home and say, folks, you want to know where Americans are loved? Go to Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Bulgaria, and Romania. That's where we're loved. That's Eastern Europe. And that continues to this day. Eastern Europe and Western Europe are very different on many, many grounds. But there's a battle. Will the next generation of Eastern Europeans be Western European in their ideology, or will they be American in their ideology? They are enormously different. What is the Western European ideology? Number one, socialism versus capitalism. Now let me explain something here. Most Americans, not being preoccupied with economics as a theory, think of capitalism as one way to run a country and socialism as another way. But it is far more than that. Socialism and capitalism create different people. And this is what the Europeans understand, but Americans often don't. We don't realize that capitalism makes people different than socialism does. And how different? Well, one enormous difference is socialism says that essentially no matter what you do or no matter how little you do, you will be taken care of. You have cradle to grave being taken care of. The state will take care of you. The state will take care of you is an enormously different way of looking at life than you better take care of yourself and your loved ones. It produces a different type of person. That's why one of the things, I know this really, really well, my future son-in-law, irony of ironies, is from France. And it is, but he shares most of my values, if not all. Anyway, it's fascinating to talk to him, and you realize, I get to confirm a lot of my, believe me, he gives me all the anti-France jokes I get from him. But I won't tell you any now. I don't want anybody to think I'm anti-French, God forbid. I'm lucky, though, I could say I have a Frenchman in my family. It was very funny development in life, and I love him dearly. Anyway, the type of person created by this ideology is so different that they have contempt for us for working so hard. It is a common Western European belief that Americans work too hard, that we are too materialistic. This is a common critique. You work, so we have at least 4 weeks paid vacation, usually 2 months, often six weeks, 2 months. We here in Sweden, are you kidding? If you don't go to work, we pay you 90% anyway of your income. By the way, I read on my radio show a couple of months ago wherein it's a problem because a lot of young Swedes have decided, hey, if I'm going to get 90% of my salary for not showing up, why should I show up? Which would strike me as a very logical argument. I'm not sure I would show up, frankly. If you said to me today, whether or not you give your lecture, we will give you 90% of the fee, I would really think about it, because I'd send you a tape and be with my family. 90% is 90%. It's incredible. To us, it's incredible. That's why you're laughing. But to them, this is the way it ought to be. You pay people, in other words, we believe you earn your way in life. They don't. By the way, remember, and this is critical, almost half of America is European in its ideology. And this is not meant as an insult or a caricature. They're generally called liberals. And I don't say this, I assume there are liberals present. It is not meant in any way as an insult. It's meant descriptively. And the further left you go, the more European you are. The average professor in the United States is far more comfortable in Paris or in London or in Berlin than in Dallas. Or, for that matter, in Lancaster. There's no question. The 2 cities that I'm in the same day. I just came from a weekend lecturing in Dallas. But I usually use Dallas because the president is from Texas. And there is a gulf because the president is Texan. Our last president was not Arkansan. He was born in Arkansas, but he was European in his ideology. And he would say it. He is more comfortable in Oxford, I strongly suspect, than he is in much of America. Just as I am more comfortable in much of America than I am at Oxford. That's all. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. There are different values here. Now, the European is a socialist orientation, meaning the government takes care, the state takes care of you, the state educates you. The idea of sending your children to a different school than the state school, they have some private schools in Europe, but it is very rare, very rare. It's almost sacrilegious to send your child. You're not going to have the state educate your child. You're going to have a private school, or even something quintessentially American, homeschool. I want to know, I don't know, I'd be curious if there are 20 homeschoolers in all of France. I don't even know if the concept exists. I don't even know if it would be legal. I'm taking my child out of school to educate him or her myself, me without a teacher's degree, teaching my child. And the European type American, the European ideological American, is starting to say, wait a minute, because they're getting worried about homeschooling, and they're saying, well, if the parent really has no teaching credential, we're not sure the parent could really do this, because we all know how important teaching credentials are to the excellence of education in general. Therefore, you have the notion of the state takes care of you. Remember I said, we earn our way. We earn our income. We earn our benefits. That's free market capitalism. That produces a very different person than the person who feels that just breathing is enough to qualify for all the state can give you. I breathe, therefore I receive. This is, if you will, the motto of the socialist mindset and what has become the liberal mindset, I believe, in much of America. You do not have to do anything to be taken care of. So that produces different people. All right, that's one enormous difference, and they believe in Europe that this is very, very big deal. The fact that we have so many rich Americans, so much richer than some others, is a moral offense in the eyes of a European and of an American-type European. Or you always hear the gap in income, the gap in income. I have to say this, it's always fascinated me, this gap in income idea. I grew up in the middle of the center of the middle class. We drove, and this may date me, we drove a DeSoto and thought we were really hotsy-totsy. When my father got an Oldsmobile, I thought we were among the richest people in America. But the guy next door, Mr. Klein, may he rest in peace, I'll never forget. I never knew his first name because we only knew people Mr. and Mrs. Mr. Klein actually had a Cadillac. I used to stare at that Cadillac and wonder how wealthy Mr. Klein must be that he could afford a Cadillac. But you know what is funny? The concept of envying or resenting the rich, I never heard of, I never thought of till I went to college and learned I should be resentful of the rich. That's where if I wasn't resentful, there was something wrong with me, and the purpose of college is to create grievances, as you know. That is why we have college. You can get a PhD in grievances today. Why you are a victim, why you are persecuted, and so on, why the society has it bad for you. And I have never understood the mentality of envying and resenting the rich. If they made it dishonestly, put them in jail. If they made it honestly, why do I care if somebody has a yacht? What? Why is that bad for me? Now, I believe, I was told recently by a friend of mine who happens to also be a psychotherapist, he said, Dennis, you are particularly a non-envious person. So maybe I really am atypical, but I suspect that I'm more American than I am atypical, because Americans look at a millionaire. This is the classic American-European difference. Americans look at a millionaire and say, hey, that's what I want to be. Europeans look at a millionaire and say, how can we take his money away? There's a very big difference. A very big difference. The American mindset in seeing a wealthy person is, hey, if I work hard, maybe maybe my children can get that Cadillac. If indeed that's what you want is a Cadillac. No one says you have to want one, but if that's what you would like, and it's okay to like that, I see nothing wrong with that, if providing you earn your money honorably and give charity and pay your taxes decently. I don't see any problem with wanting a Cadillac, if that's, and I use it as a metaphor for whatever it is you might want. These are very different outlooks in life. We don't resent, the American with American ideology, as opposed to the American with European ideology, does not resent the fact that there are richer people. It is a non-issue. Ted Turner has, I think it was, I read, 24 homes. Now, I think he's a buffoon, but not because he has 24 homes. And by the way, there is not a scintilla of a cell in me that would like 24 homes. I find keeping one up very complex. I don't know why anyone would want 24 homes. I really like nice hotels. It's fine by me. One is great, maybe two if I were super wealthy. 24 is a little sick in my opinion, but I don't resent him for having 24 homes. I resent his ideas, but I don't resent him being super wealthy. What do I care? Has it made me poorer? That's what I always ask. Have the Rockefellers' money made me poorer? Has Ted Turner's money made me poorer? If he'd sold all his homes and gave the money out tomorrow, would it benefit the world? Of course not. It'd be irrelevant. It's nothing. It's the Hungarians say it's peeing in the ocean. It doesn't mean anything. I don't care if the rich are rich. I care if there are people who can't afford decent home or decent education and so on. That bothers me. But doesn't bother me that there are rich people. It bothers Europeans. That's why they're taxed out of existence. In Scandinavia, as for example. All right. Socialism, capitalism, major difference. And remember, it's a moral difference because it produces different people. And they believe it's a moral difference because they believe it is so morally superior. Number two, Western European values are secular.
Still managing your rental business like a side hustle? Stop risking your cash flow. Over 800,000 landlords use TurboTenant to streamline their rental operations for free. From finding tenants you trust to collecting rent on time, we've got you covered at TurboTenant.com. Still managing your rental business like a side hustle? Stop risking your cash flow. Over 800,000 landlords use TurboTenant to streamline their rental operations for free. From finding tenants you trust to collecting rent on time, we've got you covered at TurboTenant.com.
They are, and not just secular, they believe in secularism. As it sounds like an oxymoron, a self-contradictory phrase. They have faith in secularism. As strongly, if you're a Christian, as strongly as you believe in Jesus, Western Europeans believe in secularism. If you're a Jew, a religious Jew, as strongly as you believe in the Torah, they believe in secularism. This is hard for people to understand, but it is. Therefore, it comes with a lot of baggage, and the baggage is very often an anti-religious ideology. They can't stand our president, as you know, for many reasons, and I will discuss them as we go on. In fact, there's one that I wanted to remember. Okay, there's another one that just came to mind. But how many lecturers take notes during their own talk? Now that I really listen, see? I'm good, thank you. George W. Bush does something that drives Europeans nuts. He invokes God. Drives them crazy. In fact, every American president does something that no one in Western Europe does. Ends every talk to the nation with God bless America. Do you think that the Prime Minister of Sweden ends with, and God bless Sweden? If a Prime Minister in Sweden ended a talk that way, he would immediately be placed under psychiatric observation. It would be clear to Swedes that he had flipped out. No Swedish politician is going to end with God bless Sweden. It would sound so bizarre, they would think they were in a time machine back to the days when Sweden was Lutheran. This is not done in Europe. God bless Germany, God bless France, God bless the Netherlands, God bless Belgium. It doesn't happen. That's not the way in which they talk. We have God we have in God we trust on our coins. They don't. They don't. God is a central issue in American life. The removal of God is a central issue in European life. And when I say European, I mean Western European. And you have to understand, while we who are God-oriented, religious, whatever term you wish to use, disagree with secularists, the secularists have contempt for us. There's a difference. I think they're utterly wrong. I even think they're dangerous. But I don't have contempt. They have contempt for those of us who believe in God. The European intellectual view, shared by the people, Europe's representatives in America, college professors, and the elite, the intellectual elite, really believe that those of us who invoke God regularly are either psychologically or intellectually impaired. They really believe this. You have to have been at an elite university to understand how much there is contempt for those of us who believe this stuff. I'll never forget when I was at Columbia University doing my graduate work. None of my professors, maybe they believed in God in some, I don't know, abstract sense, but I suspect they were all atheists and certainly all secular. And I'll never forget when I took a course in Marxism from a Marxist professor, that when I wrote my paper, a comparison of Judaism and Marxism, I thought I would need to give him smelling salts. That he had a student, he wondered, how did this kid get into Columbia? I believed in religion over Marxism. Marxism's basis is a rejection of religion. To his credit, he didn't flunk me. But I remember his reaction both in writing on my paper and orally, and to see his face. It was stunned. How did someone get into the bastion of secularism who prefers religion to Marxism? But this is exactly when I met Europeans my age, when I used to visit when I was younger, and I would say that I was religious, they would look at me like I had come from a spaceship. That's how radically secular Europe is. And America, the non-Europeanized America, is religious. Many Americans go regularly to religious services. Almost no Western Europeans go regularly to religious services. The churches of Western Europe are largely museums. They're places for tourists to visit. I was in Sweden last summer. I went to a church there. Of course it was empty. Of course, I don't know if it had hours for tourists, but no, I don't know if anyone actually prayed there. You don't pray in Sweden. This is an enormous difference again. And that has the greatest amount of ramifications. A God-centered culture versus a godless-centered culture, these have enormous differences. Let me give you an example of one of the great differences. Just said last week, I believe it was the New York Times that quoted him, but I'm not absolutely certain, a major professor in France, and I'm paraphrasing, said, we in Europe and you Americans, and he didn't say this with satire, he meant it. It's as if we come from different civilizations. You speak in terms of good and evil, and we don't know what you're talking about. And he's absolutely right. That is one of the reasons that there is such contempt for our president and was for President Reagan. President Reagan called the Soviet Union an evil empire. The Europeans went crazy. You don't do that. Who are you to declare anybody evil? It's A, it's terminology we don't use. B, who are you to make that claim? How do you know what's good and what's evil? How do you call a civilization like the Soviet Union evil? You're a country bumpkin, Ronald Reagan. We are regarded as country bumpkins, as cowboys. I'll tell you why the cowboy imagery is extremely important. But they don't. And now our president, this one, also uses evil, the axis of evil, Iran, Iraq, North Korea. Again, the Europeanized Americans, the editors of the New York Times, the professors at most any university or local college, they think this is inexcusable language to speak in terms of evil by a president of the United States declaring other governments evil. You can't do that. But to those of us who believe that there is a God who is the source of morality, from whom therefore there emanates a universal standard of good and evil, it is not odd for us to use the words good and evil. If the Soviet Union was not evil, nothing was. I mean, to me, this is not a hard call. The Soviet Union was not an evil empire, then the word can't be used, to which they would say it can't be used. The only time the Europeans and the Americans who agree with them are prepared to use evil is about the Americans who use the word evil. That is the only time that they're prepared to really make a profound moral judgment. And remember, it is that crowd who say one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Everything is relative. We actually believe that if you strap bombs to yourself and walk into a market in Tel Aviv and blow all the men, women, and children up, that it's an evil act. But not in Europe. In Europe, it's the act of a militant. They never use the word terror in Reuters. They never use the word terrorist in the BBC or in any of our papers that are European-oriented, like National Public Radio, which is European. And there's no difference between the BBC and NPR, except the accent. They have a British, NPR has an American accent. That is Europe in America. And it's not odd, because it's state-run. It's state-funded. It's not odd that it would be Europe in America. Thank God we have private radio stations and private radio shows. We speak in different terms than Europeans because we have a religious basis. Those Americans who are Europeanized in their thinking can't stand this form of thought either. If you want to visit Europe, there is no reason to cross the Atlantic. Just go to a local university. You have entered Europe. Please understand that. Europe exists here. Just as there are a few pockets of America in Europe. I spoke to one. There is, and this is one of the great blessings of the internet. We discovered on the internet a website of a Norwegian university student, Frederick Norman. He is a Norwegian 20-year-old young man. I had him on my radio show because we were so admired. He's so pro-American. He thinks America is the greatest force for good in the world. And he is a rare Norwegian. On his website, I saw a picture of a major Norwegian comedian who burned the American flag a couple of weeks ago on national Norwegian television. And as I said on my radio show, what a statement about this man and about Norwegian television, indeed about Norway, that it was not an issue to burn the American flag. And of all the flags in the world, that's the one he burned. Why didn't he burn an Iraqi flag? Do we torture citizens? Did we wipe a country off the face of the earth? Isn't that fascinating? One of the best societies in human history's flag got burned, but not the evil society. Why didn't the North Korean flag get burned? Why didn't the Chinese flag get burned for erasing Buddhist culture in Tibet? Nah, the American flag got burned on Norwegian television. But there are pockets of Americana in Western Europe. The problem, remember, though, is this is a problem. We are the most powerful country culturally as well as militarily. But we don't have pockets of American values all over the world like European socialist, secularist ideas have pockets all over the world. The president of Mexico is European. Canada is overwhelmingly European in its ideology. The Latin American elite generally is overwhelmingly European in its ideology. There are very few people around the world in powerful positions arguing for capitalism, free markets, and Judeo-Christian values. This is a real problem. So I don't know who's going to win the world battle. I don't know. I do not know. It's a tripartite battle. Militant Islam, socialism, Americanism. Or Europeanism, Americanism. Number 3, Europeans love theories. Americans love practical, pragmatic results. Americans ask what will work. That is a contemptible question to the European brain. The European brain never asks what will work. If it asked what would work, they never would have come up with communism, fascism, and Nazism. They never ask what will work. They are hyper-intellectualized. The life of the brain is life. Now, since I love reading and love the intellectual life too, whenever I go to Europe, I always think, God, there's so many more bookstores here than in the United States on any given street. And I've always admired that fact there. But it comes from a very unhealthy place. They love theory. They love it. All the goofy ideas of the world come from Europe. You name it. Postmodernism, Dadaism, Foucaultism, deconstructionism, and not to mention what I just said earlier, Nazism, communism, and fascism. They're all European. What does America come up with? America comes up with a better toilet. That's what we come up with. You're having flushing problems? We think that we're going to have a better toilet. You don't like your apartment? We think we're going to come up with a better house. That's the American mind. How can we make life better in a pragmatic way? And that's the end of the issue. And let's catch a baseball game on our way home. And it is not the world of the theory. Again, you want to test Europe, go to university. Professors make a living writing things that no one can understand. No, but you don't understand. They do that deliberately. because that's their way of saying they're smarter than those of you who don't understand them. But I know I'm smarter than all the professors I ever debated on my radio show. I know. You could listen to the debates. They're not smart. They just have lingo that makes them think they're smart. They're not particularly smart. Not at all. That's why, by the way, they often won't even go and debate their ideas. It's very easy to sound smart in front of 19-year-olds a year out of high school. Who doesn't sound smart in front of a 19-year-old? Big deal. Let them have an adult debate and they will crumble. Crumble. There's no battle of ideas at the average university. None whatsoever. That's why they love it there, because they don't have to battle ideas. In fact, the goofier the idea, the more likely they are to get tenure. It is a remarkable, just like in Europe. You don't have to work, and by golly, you get paid. It's a great system. Now, by the way, let me make something clear. There are always exceptions. There are some professors who are terrific, who love ideas in the best sense of the word and battle them. And there are, of course, there's the natural sciences, which I exclude from all this discussion. The chemistry professors, the physics professors, they actually teach facts. So that's a separate issue. But in what are called the social sciences, it is like this. They love theory. We are pragmatic. And because of that, they have contempt for us. Because the average American cannot discuss Michel Foucault quite as well as the average European can. The average American has never heard of Foucault, which is a great thing, by the way. And because if you know anything of what he stands for, you will understand why. But they came up with some real doozies. The Nazi idea, the fascist idea. Hey, we had a depression. Why didn't we have a Hitler? We had a terrible depression. Why didn't we have a Mussolini? Why didn't we have a Franco? Why didn't we have, you name the European tyrant. Why? We had terrible challenges in this country. We have different values. That's why. We had it when we were founded, we had it since then, and we have it today. They are very intellectual. We are very suspicious of intellectuals. They love intellectuals. In fact, they believe that professors should guide society. We believe, as William F. Buckley said about 30 years ago, I'd rather be governed by the first 100 names in the Cambridge, Massachusetts phone book than by 100 Harvard professors. That is what most Americans believe. The thought of being governed by professors scares the living daylights out of me. I believe there is more wisdom among the folks who collect your refuse than there is in a typical department of English at a university. I'm not being hyperbolic. I really do believe that. No one in Europe gets up in front of audiences and says this about professors. You would be regarded as a heretic. Professors should guide society. Indeed, 40 do guide French society. The members of the Académie Française. It is a lifetime honor. Only when one dies is there opening for another. This has been around for 400 or so years. And to be a member of the Académie Française you are almost superhuman in the eyes of the French people. We have nothing like that. Nothing. It doesn't mean anything to us to say that so-and-so is the distinguished professor. I mean, it means something. We have respect, but we have respect for accountants, and we have respect for real estate agents. We have respect. You do a good job. We have respect for you. And this drives, by the way, the intellectuals in America crazy. They wish they were in Europe, where they got venerated, where their words dominated society. That's part of the hostility of professors to American life. They think we're dummies because we don't listen to them. Some people actually listen to talk show hosts on the radio more than they listen to professors. Can you imagine that? So that's an enormous difference. Europe is highly cultured, more highly cultured than we are. In this, by the way, It's the one way where I share a European view. I love classical music. I wish more Americans loved classical music. But you know what? It doesn't really bother me. First of all, even in classical music, and a field I know so well, I actually periodically conduct orchestras. But let me tell you, we have more great orchestras than the rest of the world combined. I just want you to know that, even though we don't walk around bragging about it. Of course we have many great orchestras. Many, many, many. They're phenomenally good. But Americans don't think to say, if you come from Los Angeles, you don't think to say when you speak to somebody outside, well, have you heard the LAPO lately, the Los Angeles Philharmonic Orchestra? It's not the thing you talk about. It is one more nice thing in Los Angeles. We have Disneyland, and we have the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and you know what I'm saying? It's another nice thing, but it doesn't define us as culture defines a European. And I love European culture, and I love European art, absolutely, I do. But they venerate it, and I love it. I'm American. I love great music. I love great art, but I don't worship it. And something that I learned many years ago in my studies of the Holocaust is there is no link between artistic greatness and moral greatness. None. None. Knowing Matisse beautifully, being the greatest expert in the world on Manet and Monet, being able to identify every Toulouse-Lautrec the moment you see that painting, being able to understand the key modulations of a Mozart symphony, in no way makes you a kinder, finer, more decent human being at all. Culture and decency are not related. As they marched Jews to gas chambers, they played classical music in Auschwitz. The commandant of Auschwitz, after burning 6,000 Jews a day, would play a Schubert recital, would have a Schubert recital played in his apartment, which kills me because I love Schubert. And to think that such a mass murderer, torturer also loved Schubert is painful, but there's nothing I can do about it. They venerate the arts, we merely like them. Europe is also more pacifistic than we are. They believe that war is bad. They're almost pacifists. Now, I can explain in part why. After World War I and World War II, Europeans are sick of war, and I don't blame them. Especially after World War I, where so many millions of lives were lost for nothing. At least in World War II, you could say we defeated Hitler. But in World War I, they died for nothing. And the Europeans learned from World War I two things. They learned war is wrong, war is bad, don't fight. And they learned that nationalism is bad because nationalism caused World War I. America does not believe nationalism is bad. We love America. We are far more nationalistic than Europeans. In fact, they're trying to abolish countries' identities with the European community. Right? One currency and so on. We love America. Much more than the average European would speak about his country in laudatory ways, we speak about our country. We feel that our country is special. To say to a European that you feel your country is special is to sound like a fascist. Only fascists think their countries are special. Good people don't believe in their countries. Don't wave a flag. That's why professors hate flag waving. Flag waving to professors is neo-fascism. There were virtually no American flags on cars at college parking lots where the professors park. Because to them, to wave a flag is nationalism, and they hate nationalism. Hate it. So when I had on my show the big debate on one local campus whether or not to allow one American flag to fly from a flagpole at the campus. and they voted it down because they said it would offend some students and foreign students would be offended. I don't even understand that. I mean, if I studied at a campus in Uruguay, I would expect the Uruguayan flag to fly. Why on God's earth would I be offended? But anyway, flag waving is a dirty word because it's nationalism, and America believes in our nation, and they believe that those who believe in their nation are right-wing, frightening fascists, and even almost neo-Nazis. So, as a result of World War I and then World War II, nationalism and anti-nationalism and anti-war pacifism became dominant strains in European society. But in our society, we wave our flag proudly. We say, God bless America. We sing God bless America whenever we can. We have the national anthem before our ball games. At least our baseball games. We do this a lot. We like this. They don't like this. But not only that, we also believe that military might is good, not bad. We believe that some wars are evil and some wars are good. That you have to make a moral calculation. The idea that war is evil is, to most Americans, or many Americans, absurd. The war to stop Nazism was as good a thing as human beings could engage in.
Tired of giving away all your rental profits to a property manager? You don't have to. Over 800,000 landlords use TurboTenant to find and manage tenants. Keep your 10% and sign up for free at turbotenant.com. Tired of giving away all your rental profits to a property manager? You don't have to. Over 800,000 landlords use TurboTenant to find and manage tenants. Keep your 10% and sign up for free at turbotenant.com.
That was really good. And so Europe, they don't like war. War is bad, and it goes deeper than that. And this is a very powerful point, if I may say so myself. The Europeans do not want to kill evildoers. We do. To put it as bluntly as possible. And this is not just Saddam Hussein and war against an evil empire or whatever it is, or axis of evil. It's true for murderers in our midst. The European elite, and the Europeanized elite here hate capital punishment. You kill your murderers, you are primitive. We're the only industrialized democracy that does so. I am proud of that fact. Many Americans are not. I am. And that is a classic difference. You took somebody's life deliberately, then why should you be allowed to keep your own? That is how I look at capital punishment. That is how most Americans, maybe 60%, look at capital punishment. Not your professors. Professors for capital punishment, that group could fit in a men's room or ladies' room, as the case may be. Professors against capital punishment, you would need to rent out the Rose Bowl. Europeans, the elite there too. Listen to this. Just last week, the central state in Mexico, there's a state in Mexico called Mexico. You know, Mexico is composed of states like we are. There is a state called Mexico. 82% of the population of the state of Mexico voted for capital punishment for murderers. President Fox, of course, a Europeanized Mexican, said, no way. They're wrong. 82% of my people are wrong. That's okay, he can say that. But please understand that it's the Europeanized elite in Latin America, not the average Latin America, who believes that all murderers should stay alive. I don't know why that's a noble proposition, personally. But look, it's a free country. You believe what you believe. I believe what I believe. But this notion of don't really hurt the evil badly applies to Saddam and within. Do you remember Monica Seles, the tennis star, when she was stabbed in the back by some German nut who went over and put this huge kitchen knife in the back of her shoulder blade, in her shoulder blades, because he was rooting for Steffi Graf, the German tennis star? Poor Monica Seles. I mean, really, can you imagine that? A big kitchen knife down your back? I mean, it's a horrible trauma. Anyway, I followed that case. He was never put in prison. The judges thought that, well, he's not normal and he was just a crazed fan. There's no reason to punish him. They don't believe in punishment in Europe. They believe only in rehabilitation. Only. We believe in punishment and rehabilitation. That's part of the Judeo-Christian ideology of our country. We're different, really different. And I will conclude with my favorite difference. They, with contempt, call our president a cowboy. I am delighted that our president is a cowboy, because my favorite archetypical American is the Lone Ranger. And it is no coincidence that the Lone Ranger was a Texas Ranger. Our president is from Texas, indeed was a part owner of the Texas Rangers. It's really eerie, this whole story. The Lone Ranger I love because the Lone Ranger did the following. Because there was so much moral chaos in the world he lived in the early days of the West, he went around and all he did was devote his life to fighting bad guys. That's all he did. He didn't wait to be assigned by a court. He wasn't a member of the West Texas police force. He was the Lone Ranger. He went alone to fight evil. That is America in a nutshell. Those who tell us we should wait for the United Nations do not believe that we should ever do any fighting of evil alone. Only wait for a group to tell us to do it. I don't believe in that, because I trust much more in the American conscience than in the conscience of the world. I have deep contempt for world opinion. On most issues, it's just wrong, really wrong. And listen to this too. I've never gotten an answer to this challenge to the left. It is said frequently, it is wrong for America to fight Iraq. And I'm not talking about the war at all. I'm talking only about this argument. I don't want to get sidetracked. It is wrong for America to attack Iraq alone, unilaterally. Correct? You hear that all the time. But if the Security Council votes that we ought to, then it is right. So wait a minute. Wait a minute. You don't believe in right and wrong. You believe in voting on moral issues. You have no moral compass. If Syria, that's a member of the Security Council, an esteemed, open, free, beautiful country, if Syria and China vote that we should attack Iraq, then it is a good act. But if they don't vote for it, it is a bad act. It's either a good act or a bad act, whether or not they vote either way. If it's bad if they vote yes, and if it's good if they vote no. But they don't have a moral compass. They don't have the sense of good and evil. Remember the French professor. You Americans talk about good and evil. We don't know where you're coming from. We don't use that language. We use the language of consensus. The Lone Ranger didn't have consensus. There was a bad guy to be captured. I'm going out with my gun to get him. The Lone Ranger would be viewed on European television as an explanation of America, but from their standpoint, one that explains how terrible we are. Whereas I, with pride, bought all the videotapes and showed it to my little kid so that he should emulate the Lone Ranger if necessary. We like that figure. The Europeanized American doesn't. They like the United Nations and an international court. International is a beautiful word to them. International is neither beautiful nor ugly to me, but it certainly is not going to be the source of my moral behavior. My Judeo-Christian value system will. The God who tells me in that book, do not stand by the blood of your neighbor, that's the God that I believe animates our society. So, now you see the three-pronged battle in the world today. Will the world become Muslim? And it may very well. Europe is becoming Muslim. There are 32 million Muslims in Europe. And many of them don't like Europe and don't like America and want Europe to be Muslim. And Nigeria is fighting a civil war between its Christians and its Muslims because the Muslims wish to impose Islamic law on Christians and on all non-Muslims. That was what the riots about the Miss World contest were about. 1 million non-Muslims have been murdered in Sudan because they resist the Sudanese government's imposition of Islam on them. So between peaceful expansion of Islam and militant expansion, the world may end up Muslim. The world may end up with West Europe's values. The elites of almost all the countries in the world. Hey, Pol Pot. You know who Pol Pot was? The man who did the Cambodian genocide? He studied at the Sorbonne. That's the Harvard of France. The elites of the world study at Cambridge and Oxford and the Sorbonne, and indeed at our Europeanized university. Maybe they'll prevail, and maybe we will prevail. But we can't prevail if we don't know why we're different. That's why this talk, in my opinion, is such an important one for Americans and others to hear. Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Very happy you came. And let me, by the way, you know what let's see, Mark Haddon, where are you? There you are. By the way, folks, he deserves an applause. He made this day possible, and I would like, stand up, Mark, stand up. Come on, come on. Right. You're a beautiful man. He made it all possible, and it's his idea and his effort for years. In fact, he asked me to give this lecture when I was 26. We're working on it for 28 years. It's remarkable. And it happened, see? Mark was 11, which is really remarkable. Now, by the way, let me just get the schedule clear, because I do want to get, where are the microphones, by the way? Are somebody walking around? Oh, they're up here. So why don't you line up if you want to say anything. You don't even have to ask a question. I accept comments. I just ask that they be brief. And especially if you don't agree. See, telling people when you get home why I was wrong is not courageous. Tell me why I was wrong. I promise to treat you respectfully. I'm known for that on the radio. Now, is there books? Is that correct after this?
Yes.
Okay. My books are available here. Okay. So
you're getting fee for these. I'm kidding.
Thank you. But there are books available. But I do want, in case you're not coming for books, could you write on a slip of paper your email address? So first of all, I record digitally all my talks. If you would like a copy of this, there's a nominal fee. It's not free, but it's not anything serious. I could email you information, as well as the columns that I write and so on. I'm not going to sell you anything, and if you give me your name, I promise you will not get any ads, at least not from my account, that I've sold to advertisers asking you to enlarge any of the organs of your body. I promise that I will not have been responsible, not breasts or you know what. Yes?
Dennis, there's a sheet of paper on the table where the books are being sold to capture these addresses.
Good. Okay, so there's a sheet of paper there, and if you're not going there and you want to give me your email address, do so. Okay, does anybody want to come? You have a microphone? Go ahead, please.
Dennis, you stated that Eastern Europe is pro-American. Can you elaborate why that is? And
Yes, excellent.
Where Russia is involved?
Yes, very good question. And I don't even have to repeat it because you had a microphone. Okay. Here's my theory on why Eastern Europe is different. Eastern Europe believed that the Soviet Union was an evil empire. When Ronald Reagan said Soviet Union was an evil empire, they booed in Paris and they cheered in Prague, Warsaw, Budapest, Sofia, and Bucharest. That's the difference. They knew we were right, and they knew the Western Europeans were not doing diddly squat for them to liberate them from communism. So there is a tremendous reserve of goodwill for this country and contempt for the Western European appeasers of their oppressor. That's big stuff. And that's why Chirac can't shut them up. Because they're angry at France. They're angry at Germany. They're angry at Belgium and the Netherlands and Sweden, which is neutral among the Nazis and neutral in the Cold War. See? Big difference between Eastern Europe and Western Europe. Now, I don't know what'll be the next generation. A generation arose which forgot Joseph. Remember? A new Pharaoh arose. I don't know what the next generation will remember. But this generation remembers America fought their oppressors, the Western Europeans appeased them. Big difference. Also, Eastern Europe is, at least the case, certainly in the case of Poland, far more religious than Western Europe. We're getting a mic over here. Okay, yes, good. Oh, good. Thank you.
Is there really an answer for militant Islam, and how did it get from regular Muslimism to radical? It's scary the transformation that's taking place. It's, I don't know if it's understandable, if it's understandable, or it's just evil and radical.
We have a real problem here. There is a movement, and it's worth reading about. Again, the greatness of the internet is you can find almost anything you want. It's called Wahhabism. The Wahhabi Muslims, Wahhabi. The Wahhabi Muslim was a sect founded in the 19th century by what we would call today a Saudi national on the Arabian Peninsula. Muhammad comes from the Arabian Peninsula. Egyptians and Moroccans and Tunisians are no more Arab, were no more Arab than Paraguayans were. They were Arabized by Muhammad and his successors in bringing the Arabic language from Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula. How important the Arabian Peninsula is? You ever hear of Al Jazeera television? Al Jazeera means the peninsula. The peninsula has a holy resonance in Islam because that's where the original Islam comes from and where Muhammad comes from. And so this Wahhabi became a particularly stringent form of Islam. For reasons that are beyond the purview of this talk, Islam was dominant, indeed had created a civilization which in many ways was quite higher than European Christian civilization in about the 10th century, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th centuries. It began to decay, and at that point you had different responses, at least in the Arab world. Remember, most Muslims are not Arab. Almost all Arabs are Muslim, but not all Muslims are Arab. In fact, most are not. The largest Muslim nation is Indonesia. The second largest is India, where there are so many Muslims, but they're still a minority compared to Hindus. There is a belief that is classic to Islam that the world should be made Muslim. I mean, that is not a new invention. It is a profoundly proselytizing and profoundly even using force when necessary, religion, to have people accept Islam. And look, the average Muslim is hardly a terrorist, obviously. On the other hand, and here is the sadness, and I say it really is the sadness and tragedy of our day, I know of no mainstream Muslim organization that has condemned all Islamic terror. This is frightening, including American Muslim organizations. They condemn 9/11, but they don't condemn Islamic terror. Can you imagine if Christians slaughtered non-Christian men, women, and children, how every pastor in America would march to cleanse the name of Christianity from such evil? And I am puzzled. Don't Muslims understand how their religion looks to the rest of the world? When people are told in the name of Allah you can torture and murder, slit the throats of American Jewish journalists? I mean, I just don't understand. If it happened to Christianity, I mean, one Christian kills a doctor who performs abortions, and Christians from right to left, including anti-abortion Christians, go before the press to say, we denounce this man. This is not what we preach. This is evil what he did. It isn't Christian. And that's one guy. It's a very real problem. It's a terrible problem. And unfortunately, not unfortunately, I guess unfortunately, because you never want to believe that this is the only answer, but the only answer now is resolve, is great strength in wiping out the people who do this. They're not going to be won over with love. That's a European idea. Who has a microphone, please?
Dennis, are we not doing a disservice based on what you just said? Bruce asked the question that I wanted to ask, using peaceful and militant Islam in the same sentence. Is there even a peaceful Islam left?
Listen, let me say something. Let me tell you, the day after 9/11, because I've studied Islam, I studied Arabic, and so I claim no expertise, but I'm not a novice in the arena. And I've even spoken at mosques. I dialogue with Muslims in the Persian Gulf. So here is the day after 9/11, people called my radio show and said, Dennis, is Islam a violent religion? They don't longer call up asking me this either because they've made up their own minds, yes or no, or because I said I never ever characterize religions as anything. Religions are what their followers make them. If I was doing a talk show in Spain in the 15th century and somebody said, hey, is Catholicism a violent religion during the Inquisition, let's say? Well, would I have answered? I said, I can't answer you, but I can tell you that right now it's violent. Okay? So right now, the violent have taken over Islam. I cannot characterize Islam as either peaceful or violent because it's a meaningless phrase to me. Islam is what Muslims make of it. It isn't a disembodied theory. Christians know that because Christians will often say, oh, those Christians don't represent Christianity, these Christians don't represent Christianity, and so on. So we understand that. It is what the adherents make it. America is what Americans will make it. That is, it's in our hands to shape our country. I'm not evading your question. I have no answer to that question. There are peaceful Muslims, there are militant and angry and aggressive and terroristic Muslims. What I can only tell you is that right now, the dominant strains of Islam are violent. The American Muslim schools, according to a New York Times report, are dominated by Wahhabi, Saudi, anti-American, anti-Jewish teachings.
I believe on your radio show that
it's not working, but I'll yeah.
Tired of giving away all your rental profits to a property manager? You don't have to. Over 800,000 landlords use TurboTenant to find and manage tenants. Keep your 10% and sign up for free at turbotenant.com. Still managing your rental business like a side hustle? Stop risking your cash flow. Over 800,000 landlords use TurboTenant to streamline their rental operations for free. From finding tenants you trust to collecting rent on time, we've got you covered at turbotenant.com.
Yes, it does, yes.
You interviewed the authors of Tea with Terrorists.
The authors of what?
The book Tea with Terrorists.
I don't think I was on my show.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Anyway, I just finished that book, and it does an excellent job at comparing Islam with Nazism.
Well, I will only comment on one clear similarity, which is very disturbing, and that is the anti-Semitism of the Nazis, which we thought would not be repeated ever, is now being repeated in major arenas of the Islamic world. It is commonplace to teach Muslim children that Jews kill Gentile children to use their blood to bake matzah. I mean, it was a PhD in Saudi Arabia just reported this last year in a mainstream Saudi newspaper. The Egyptian government had the Protocols of the Elders of Zion on for 40 consecutive nights, a 40-part series on featuring the most notorious anti-Semitic forgery. So Berlin of 1937-38 is now major parts of the Islamic world in 2003. It is unbelievable in that way. And anti-Semitism is your sure bet predictor of something that's going to erupt into evil against much more than Jews. I wrote a book 20 years ago on anti-Semitism. In fact, we have just rewritten it, my co-author and I, come out in August, called Why the Jews? The Reason for Anti-Semitism. And we wrote that the greatest lesson of anti-Semitism is for good non-Jews to understand: never dismiss anti-Semitism as the Jews' problem alone. Anti-Semites begin with Jews, they never end with Jews. And because Hitler and the Nazis were dismissed as a Jewish problem, we ended up with 40 million other people dying in World War II. If the West had understood, if you hear my show, now almost every day I play the actual tape of the Prime Minister of England after returning from a meeting with Adolf Hitler, announcing that I have a piece of paper here, and on it I have Hitler's signature, that there will be peace in our time, and the big cheers from the people listening. This is 1938. Yep. People love to believe in signatures. The North Koreans signed a lot of things. It's very helpful.
Dennis?
Where are you? Show me where you...
Right here.
Okay.
What do you believe would be the most effective way to tip the scales more towards the American Judeo-Christian capitalism?
To tip the scales in the world or in America?
Well, probably first in America.
That's right, first in America. You see, if we get Americans to believe in American values and not European values, we're in great shape. That really would be enough for us at this time. The greatest battle in the world, in my opinion, is not outside of the United States, it's inside the United States. And it is a nip and tuck battle because the other values world dominates the media, dominates the universities, dominates the professional associations, the American Library Association, American Nursing Association. I mean, radicals have taken over almost everything. And that's the battle for our Judeo-Christian capitalist system and its values is here. Who is teaching this to our kids? We assume that it'll just happen by living here. Every generation has to refight the American Revolution, ideologically, not violently. And we send our kids to college. You got to read my piece. I just want to inform you, I write a column every week. It's all over the internet. It's in local papers. If your local paper doesn't have it, just go to the internet. If you don't find it at Town Hall, well, it is townhall.com, worldnetdaily.com, jewishworldreview.com, and DennisPrager.com. And so it's online. My last column was people don't spend, I don't remember the title, but something to the effect, don't spend a lot of money on college. And I begin, this is my first line, paraphrasing Churchill in another context. Never have so many paid so much to so few for so little. An American parent who believes in these values sends their kid to college, and the kid comes home and thinks the father and mother are primitives. This happens all the time because they now think they know a lot. As you know, what's the old saying? I went to college thinking my parents were morons, and then 4 years later I wondered I was shocked at how much they had learned, or something like that. In other words, during college, people think their parents know nothing because they can't quote Foucault and the others. And this happened in the 60s. Parents were just blindsided by their kids being radicalized at college and told, "Oh, Dad, you're a sexist. Ma, you're a nothing for being a full-time mom. A woman goes to work and that's how she becomes something. You're a nothing. You let Dad be a patriarch and while you just mopped floors. All you did was raise kids. That's nothing. A job, that's something." And the parents didn't have answers. They weren't equipped to give intellectual answers to this stuff. It's taken a generation to learn. It's funny, I was just with young couples at a retreat in Dallas. And they're all upper middle class, very intelligent people. I mean, extraordinarily so. I was very pleasantly surprised at the number of wives, it was all couples, young couples, in their 30s basically, who were in fact full-time mothers. And proud of it. In other words, they didn't have the embarrassment that a generation ago, I remember you'd ask a woman, "What do you do?" She'd say, "Well, I'm a domestic engineer." Because she had to make up a cute title. But now to say full-time mother, in other words, it takes a generation to react to the radical attacks because we have to formulate the answers. And so we need to formulate the answers and teach them to the next generation. But first you've got to know it yourself. That's why this is what I feel very strongly about conveying now a lot. Why America is different. Yes. Or yes.
Over here.
Right.
The question is, are we just going through a phase? I mean, you say we have Europeanism versus Americanism. In the 60s, we had hippies that turned into yuppies that turned into middle-class businessmen. Could it be possible that we're looking at a phase in political activism which is liberal? Could we?
Well, I wish it were a phase, and this is the only political comment directly so that I'm making, but forgive me, I believe this, and I hope I'm wrong. I believe that one of our two political parties has been Europeanized, Democratic Party. So it's not a phase. I mean, it's a party that not all of its, certainly not the rank and file typical member, but its leadership to a large extent, its House members, many of its senators, I believe have in fact taken on the United Nations over Lone Ranger idea. Contempt for the Lone Ranger, adulation of the United Nations, adulation of pacifism, and so it's not a phase. It's a very real battle for the heart and soul of America. And you're as likely to find a Europeanized American in Iowa as you are on the coasts. Yes, please.
Dennis, right here.
I see.
I'd like you to comment on whether you feel that there's some similarities. As I listened to this, I thought that the whole idea of freedom versus having your affairs run by aristocrats seems to kind of be a parallel, but in a different way. The elites, for instance, in Europe and some of the elites in this country feel that their education entitles them to control the resources that average people in America earn.
That's right.
Sweat of their brow.
That's correct.
And Americans feel like they ought to be able to control their resources themselves. Would you like to comment?
You are so right. And that helps answer the other gentleman's question about passing phase. The Democratic Party believes that the more we're taxed and the more the government takes care of us, the better it is. That's a European idea. It's not an American idea, as I understand and defined American ideas here. And there is a word for what you said in a great book by Thomas Sowell. who is one of the greatest thinkers in America today, happens to be black, and I only mention that because so often we think of black thinkers on the left, and Sowell, who is one of the giants of thought today, is not. And Thomas Sowell calls them the anointed, and that's what they believe. That is the reason that they feel, look, they have PhDs, you don't. So already they must be wiser, because they confuse education with wisdom. Which means, therefore, that there were no wise people prior to the PhD being invented, right? Your grandparents could not be wise. I always wondered, did Jesus have a PhD? Did Buddha? Did Moses? I mean, the people we really learn from, did they have immense educations, or did they have immense wisdom? Now, I'm for both education and wisdom, but education doesn't give you wisdom any more than asparagus does. It gives you wisdom if you want to be wise. Anyway, they believe we have PhDs, we know better, and we mean well. The selfish, capitalist, conservative, Republican, they by definition, they're so selfish they can't mean well. The reason they want lower taxes is because they want the rich to have more money. Not because we on principle believe that people should be allowed to keep the money that they worked hard for. No, can't be. We can't be principled. Only they can be. And so they are the anointed. It has to be. They believe that they know better what to do with your money than the American people does. That's what they truly believe. They believe the American people are stupid. They believe all people. They believe the French people are stupid, the elite of France, the elite of Germany think the average German is an idiot. This is by definition. What is the line of the defenders of abortion? If you can't trust a woman with her body or whatever it is, then you can't trust her with a baby or something like that, right? Trust women. Well, why? So here is the argument. You trust a woman on abortion. I'm not going to talk about abortion, but they don't trust people with their money. With a human fetus, we have total trust, but with their money, we have no trust. We know better. It's a fascinating thing. I believe that I have respect for the American people. And if it's such a day that I have such disrespect for the average American, I will have to rethink my whole life. That I would have such contempt that I want to take your money away because I know better what to do with it. The hubris involved is the arrogance is beyond belief. I know better than you do what to do with your money that you honorably earned. That's European. Yes?
I'd like to know if you'd comment on the church in America. You've talked about elitism in the universities. As a Catholic, I've been very frustrated for years with the church as far as their non-stance or even support for candidates that are pro-abortion. And then recently we've had the situation with the child abuse in the Catholic Church that was covered up for years. Can you comment on that?
You know what my comment is? My heart breaks for the average American Catholic. It does. And I speak from my heart to you. I don't know what it must be like, but if you have the values that I think you do, A, in being here, B, in what you spoke, your statement on abortion, and so on, and looking at the abuse scandal, which is traumatizing when you think about it. I mean, what you were led to believe was relatively pure. I mean, everybody knows that everyone is a sinner and is a given in life, but Catholicism certainly believes in degrees of sin, as I think common sense suggests. I mean, abusing a child and jaywalking are not in the same universe of illegal or sinful. I don't know. I think a dear friend of mine, I knew this was coming because one of my closest friends in life is a former priest. And I want to tell you why he left the priesthood. He loves the church. He was a good priest. He was a beloved priest. He became a principal of Catholic schools. He was loved by his students. But he said he saw virtually no other models like him. He said, I went in the hope I can't stay a priest without peers. And he didn't see abuse, child abuse, he would have reported it, but he knew that this was going to come about, and he was very disturbed at what he saw, and he is now, married with 2 children, and he says, Dennis, I don't believe in institutions anymore. I mean, this is a man who devoted half his life to being a priest. And he says, I just can't, institutions just don't work. And I understand where he's coming from. I don't know what will be. And I look at the National Council, the bishops, and some of the positions they take, where aside from abortion and homosexuality, they essentially are Europeanized entirely. They're, basically socialists. So the answer is going to have to come from Catholics, not from me. And you will have to recreate a something beautiful, because there are too many beautiful Catholics to waste. You can't waste them. And in effect, in many ways, Catholics have become better than their church. It's painful for me because it's not my religion, and I so don't like to say these things. But that's how I see it. The number of wonderful Catholics is very high, and yet the church has failed them, has failed its members. So maybe the members will have to, and I think they will. I don't mean build a new thing, but rebuild. From the ground up, something that reflects the goodness that I think the average Catholic in America represents. But I started and I conclude my answer with my heart breaks, because the role of the priest in Catholicism is much greater than the role of a rabbi in Judaism, my religion, let's say. The rabbi in Judaism, is basically, he teaches. Rabbi means teacher. You can have a perfectly good service with no rabbi. A rabbi is not necessary for any official religious duty in Judaism. Not to run the prayer, not to marry a couple, nothing. They're nice to have, and I think we need them, but they don't have a theological place. The priest does. Nor does the pastor in Protestantism have a theological place like the priest in Catholicism. For that group to fail, and not all have failed, certainly, I don't want to overstate it, but for the failure to be that great, and for the people above them not to be horrified when they learned of it, this has to be a little shattering. But, with faith in God, you'll overcome it over the long run, and people of faith outside of your faith are also there to help you.
Hi, Mr. Prager. My name is Ilya Naiman.
Hi.
And I was just wondering, based on your talk about the university system, are there any good, hardy American universities left in the country? And what regions that you would happen to know about with those good, hardy American universities that still have the element that made this country so great?
There are a few small colleges that I know that adhere to value systems. There are also some church-related colleges that do as well. I know there's a Thomas Aquinas College, I believe, that is here in Southern California, which I suspect is like that. But you see, I want us to infiltrate the colleges. Why should we let them take them over? We have to fight back, but we can't fight back if we don't know the ideas. We can't be intimidated. When somebody gets up and starts talking about some ism, some deconstructionism that they now believe in, just don't get flustered. The person doesn't know anything, because all you have to do is deconstruct their speech. If Shakespeare didn't mean what he wrote, then clearly the speaker didn't mean what he spoke, so we don't have to take him seriously. If they really believe in moral relativism, then how can they judge George W. Bush? Their world is so filled with self-contradictory ideas, but it's so flowery and it sounds so sophisticated that the typical just decent person is floored by it. The college freshman thinks, wow, boy, they really must know something. But they don't know much at all. I have them on my shows. You should hear them. I had the leading columnist in Canada on. He wrote an anti-American article, and I invited him on my show. And I treat these people respectfully. It's the only reason. And I do it for many reasons, not least of which is otherwise I'll get no guests who disagree with me. So of course I treat them respectfully. But you should have heard that interview. I mean, he said, you Americans, you're self-righteous when you say you're better than other cultures. I said, sir, I just want to tell you that we don't feel this way only about America. I think Canada is morally superior to Sudan. Don't you? And this was fascinating, fascinating. Canada, an open, democratic, free country with people from all backgrounds living in peace, right? Versus Sudan, which has genocided its black people because they won't accept forced Islam. Okay? It's not a hard question, is it? And he said he would not say that Canada is a morally superior society to Sudan. So you see, as soon as you puncture their balloon, it's floored. I had a professor on. This I'd never done before. I had a professor from UC Irvine on whom I disagreed with. He told his students, and I got this from one of the students at UC Irvine. He said, 80% of what Dennis Prager says on the radio, I can prove is false. So I thought, look, it's very important for me to know the truth. And if I'm only right 20% of the time, I want to hear it firsthand. So I had the man on. You can hear that too. I tape all my shows. You can get them through my office and my website. And he said, among other things, I said, I'm just curious, because he was really lambasting America and Israel. So I said, all I know is that Israelis have a huge peace movement. Huge, that demonstrates against their government and demonstrates for peace. How come there's no peace movement among the Palestinians? How come there's never been a demonstration once among Palestinians against terror? He says, that's not true. I said, really? Professor, I'm happy to hear this. Could you tell me what you mean? He said, I was there. I saw 10,000 Palestinians demonstrate against terror. And I said to him, sir, I've never said this in 20 years on the radio to a guest. You're lying. And he didn't say anything else. I mean, he is lying. He just made it up. Do you believe 10,000 Palestinians ever demonstrated against Palestinian terror? I said, I'm just curious, Professor. Why do you feel that it was never reported by anyone other than you? Why didn't the BBC ever report it? During the break, I did a search. 10,000 Palestinians on Google. I know how to use Google real well. Okay, 10,000, or Palestinian demonstration against terror, or Ramallah demonstration. Nothing in the billions of documents in Google. And he's the only witness to this event. There is no other. And that's what he tells his students, that 10,000 Palestinians he saw demonstrate against terror. But no student is going to sit there and think the professor made it up. It's hard to lie like that. It really is. But he did.
It's rather depressing.
It's very depressing. It's very depressing. But instead of just going to colleges that we agree with, we should go to cheap colleges that we disagree with. Because to go to an expensive college is usually a terrible waste of your money. I'll leave you with one thought on this. When I raised the issue of parents paying too much for college education, one man called up. I've learned so much from callers, and he said, Dennis, people should do what I do. I pay my kids $5,000 a year to go to a cheap college. So my kids travel around the world, put down money for a house. He said, buy themselves beautiful cars, and I come out much ahead, and they love it. And I thought it was one of the great ideas I had ever heard. Pay your kids not to go to an expensive college. I thought it was great. 870 KRLA, every day 9 to 12. Thank you so much for coming, and now we'll sign some books. Thank you so much. Thank you.
This has been Timeless Wisdom with Dennis Prager. Visit DennisPrager.com for thousands of hours of Dennis's lectures, courses, and classic radio programs, and to purchase Dennis Prager's Rational Bibles.